Miami, a city of contrasts, where dazzling wealth coexists with quiet despair. The coastline, with its fashionable hotels and private yachts, seems like a mirage to those who live deep in the mainland, in areas far from the tourist postcards. Here, in the shadow of skyscrapers and palm trees, is the Palm Haven residential complex, a place where real estate prices still allowed the middle class to cling to their version of the American dream. Chase and Celia Rivera had been living in one of these typical houses for 6 years. They met in college, got married right after graduation, and moved to Miami in search of opportunities and sunshine. The first few years went according to plan. Chase got a job as a tour guide for a large company specializing in sea excursions. Celia got a job as an administrator at a local spa. They paid their mortgage and occasionally treated themselves to dinners at restaurants on Ocean Drive. Not the most expensive, but quite decent. But 2 years ago, the travel company underwent optimization, and Chase was among dozens of employees who were laid off. 3 months of unsuccessful job hunting depleted their savings. The calls from debt collectors became more and more insistent. That's when he decided to become an Uber driver, a temporary solution that dragged on. On this Sunday morning, Chase Rivera sat in his 2019 Honda Accord, the only valuable asset he had left. The car was clean and well-maintained because it was now his office. He was checking the app, planning his route for the day, when the first order appeared on the screen. Accept? Chase sighed and pressed the button. Miami was waking up, and passengers returning from night parties needed transportation. The order acceptance rating affected the algorithms, and therefore his earnings. Every day started the same way. At 6 a.m., Chase left the house, trying not to wake Celia. He ate breakfast in the car, usually a sandwich he had made the night before. By noon, he had about a dozen rides, then a short lunch break, and work continued until late in the evening, especially on weekends, when rates were higher and he could earn more. Chase rarely talked to his passengers, only if they started the conversation first. He knew that not everyone wanted to talk, and good reviews were more important than fleeting conversations. Sometimes he drove wealthy tourists to yacht clubs and expensive hotels. These trips were the hardest, not because of the passengers, but because of the feeling of the gap between their worlds. Returning home after midnight, Chase often found Celia already asleep, or pretending to be asleep. Celia Rivera, née Mendez, had always dreamed of more. In college, she was attracted to Chase's energy and confidence. He was the captain of the swim team, with bright plans for the future and an infectious laugh. Now there was no trace of that Chase left. Tired, silent, constantly stressed about money. That's the husband she had seen every day for the past 2 years. At the spa, Celia worked with wealthy clients, the wives of bankers, lawyers, and doctors. She listened to their stories about travel, designer clothes, and renovated interiors in their homes in Key Biscayne. And with each story, her own life seemed more and more dull. From their bedroom window, she could see the complex's swimming pool, small but clean. They used to spend a lot of time there together. Now Celia went there alone, and on Chase's rare days off, he just slept, recharging his batteries for the new week. Celia often thought she should be grateful. Chase didn't drink, cheat on her, or hit her, unlike the husbands of some of her friends. He just disappeared. Physically, he was there, but emotionally, he was somewhere far away, behind the wheel, transporting strangers. Behind the wall of their bedroom was an empty study, a room they had planned to turn into a nursery. But talk of children stopped when Chase lost his job. Celia understood the logic. Why have a child when they could barely make ends meet? But her biological clock didn't obey logic. A month ago, a new tenant moved into the house next door. James Hawthorne was above average height, with a neat haircut and a confident smile. His impeccably ironed shirts and brand new BMW set him apart from the other residents of the complex. "I'm a real estate agent specializing in luxury properties," he introduced himself at a barbecue the neighbors threw in honor of Independence Day. Celia noticed how the tone of the conversation changed when the neighbors heard about his profession. Everyone here dreamed of better housing. James didn't seem to care about his status. He listened with equal attention to retired George's stories about the days before Hurricane Andrew and young Mother Amy's complaints about rent increases. When it was Celia's turn to talk about herself, she felt his gaze linger on her a little longer than on the others. "So your husband is an Uber driver? That's hard work. I respect people who aren't afraid of hard work," he said, and there was not a hint of condescension in his voice. For the first time in a long time, Celia felt that someone really understood their situation without judging or pitying them. Chase wasn't at the barbecue. It was a busy day because of the holiday, and he had decided to work extra hours. In the weeks that followed, Celia ran into James more and more often, at the pool, at the local supermarket, in the parking lot. He always found a moment to talk, asked about her life, remembered details from previous conversations. It was flattering. To be seen, to be heard, such simple things that she had missed so much. Her marriage to Chase was falling apart. There were no loud scandals or open hostility, just a quiet alienation that grew deeper day by day. The tension was especially palpable in the evenings, when they ate dinner in silence in front of the TV or lay in bed, each buried in their own phone. "We're like roommates, not husband and wife," Celia said once when Chase once again refused to go to the movies with her, preferring to sleep before his night shift. "What do you suggest?" "I need to work to pay the bills," he replied wearily. "I work too, Chase, but life can't be all about work. Now is not the time for fun. Someday we'll get out of this hole." "When? In a year? 5 years? 10? I'm already 30, Chase." This conversation led nowhere, just like dozens of similar ones before it. On one of Chase's rare days off, they met James in the lobby of the complex. He greeted them politely and introduced himself. Chase shook his hand, but Celia noticed the tension in his eyes. Later, he asked her how she knew their neighbor. "We sometimes chat by the pool. James just moved in. He's a real estate agent." "A real estate agent," Chase repeated with an intonation that Celia couldn't quite figure out. Perhaps envy or distrust. In recent weeks, Chase had become even more withdrawn, and Celia sometimes caught him looking at her suspiciously. She couldn't understand why. Maybe it was work pressure, or something else. Thomas Garcia was perhaps the only person Chase kept in regular contact with. They had met at the travel company, and when everyone was laid off, they looked for work together for a while. Thomas was luckier. He got a job as a manager at a small hotel. "You're too obsessed with money, buddy," Thomas said when they met for a beer at a bar near Chase's house. It was a rare opportunity for Chase to relax. "It's easy to say when you have a stable job," Chase replied, taking a sip. "I know, but you're killing yourself with those hours, and your marriage too." Chase was silent. Thomas was the only one he sometimes told about his problems with Celia. "How is she, by the way?" Thomas asked. "Fine," Chase shrugged. "She's working. She complains that I'm never home." "She's right. What am I supposed to do, quit my job?" "Maybe you should look for something else. I heard the marina is looking for sailing instructors." "With my schedule, when would I have time to look? And who would hire me without experience?" The conversation moved on to other topics: sports, politics, the news. But the thought that Thomas might be right stuck in Chase's mind. What if he really was losing Celia because of his obsession with money? What if one day he came home and she was gone? That thought scared him more than debt collectors and overdue bills. Celia and James's first meeting alone took place by the pool on a weekday. Celia took the day off. The spa had few appointments, and the manager offered the staff a day off. It was a cloudless day, perfect for relaxing by the water. She didn't expect to see anyone there in the middle of the workday, and was surprised to see James reading a book in a deck chair. "Do realtors take days off too?" she asked, dropping her bag on the deck chair next to him. "The advantage of a flexible schedule," James smiled. "I scheduled my client meetings for the evening and decided to spend the morning in the sun. In Miami, you have to take advantage of all the benefits of the climate. Their conversation lasted for several hours. James talked about the houses he was selling, penthouses with ocean views, villas with yacht docks. Celia listened, realizing that this was the first real conversation she had had in a long time. In recent months, Chase had either been sleeping or discussing bills and debts. After that meeting, they began to see each other regularly. At first, it was by chance, in the common areas of the complex. Then there were reasons. James asked for a recommendation for a good barber. Celia asked for advice on investing in real estate. Once he invited her to lunch at a restaurant on Brickell Avenue, a business lunch, as he called it. At the restaurant, James introduced her to several colleagues. "You have potential in this field," he said as they returned home. "With your communication skills and knowledge of spa clients' psychology, you could succeed in real estate sales." Celia dismissed the idea, but it stuck in her mind. The possibility of a different life, a career, an income, it all seemed like an unattainable dream, but James talked about it as a real prospect. Meanwhile, Chase's financial situation was deteriorating. His monthly car loan payments had increased after the bank revised the terms. His health insurance had become more expensive. Gas prices had gone up. Uber had lowered the percentage of payments to drivers. Every evening he checked the app, calculating his daily earnings and subtracting his expenses. One day, after returning home from a hard day, Chase found an envelope from debt collectors on the kitchen table. Celia had placed it in a prominent place. "They called again. They threatened to take us to court," she said. "I'll take care of it," Chase replied wearily, though he had no idea how. His savings were dwindling, and his debt payments exceeded his income. The next morning, on his way to work, he called the collection agency and negotiated a restructuring. The new payment plan gave him some breathing room, but added interest. Was it a solution? No, but it bought him time. Chase stopped going to coffee shops and brought a thermos from home instead. He gave up eating out for lunch and ate only sandwiches he made at home. Every dollar counted. He started taking more night shifts when the rates were higher. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. His back ached from sitting behind the wheel for so long. But what hurt most was something inside. A feeling of powerlessness, of being unable to provide the life he had promised Celia. He and Celia had almost stopped talking. Not because they were fighting, but simply because they didn't see each other. She left for work when he was sleeping after his night shift. He left for the evening rush hour when she came home. On the rare occasions when they did see each other, they only discussed mundane matters: bills, groceries, the broken washing machine. Celia began to stay late after work more often. Company party, girls' night out with colleagues, sales training. The explanations sounded reasonable, but their frequency was alarming, especially considering that she had always rushed home before. One morning, as he was getting ready for work, Chase accidentally saw a message pop up on Celia's phone screen while she was in the shower. "Looking forward to our meeting today. J. James, their neighbor?" Chase felt something cold and heavy sink into his stomach, but he had no right to look at his wife's phone. Trust was all they had left. But the thought kept nagging at him. That day, he drove past the spa where Celia worked several times to check if she was there. Her car was in the parking lot. That reassured him a little, but his suspicion did not disappear completely. A few days later, returning home earlier than usual due to a technical problem with the Uber app, he noticed a glass with wine residue on the coffee table in the living room. Celia rarely drank alone. There was only one glass, but there were traces of a second one on the table, circles on the polished surface. "Amy, our neighbor, came by to complain about the rent increase," Celia explained when he asked. The explanation sounded plausible, but something in her voice, a slight nervousness, made Chase doubt her. He began to notice small details: new earrings he hadn't seen before, a fresh manicure, even though Celia was economizing on salon treatments, the scent of unfamiliar perfume in the room. Perhaps there were innocent explanations for all of this. Perhaps he was becoming paranoid due to stress. James and Celia were becoming less and less careful. Once, while driving past a restaurant in the city center, Thomas noticed them at a table by the window. They were sitting close together, clearly having a personal conversation, not a business lunch, as Celia had told Chase. Thomas didn't know whether to tell his friend. Chase was already at his limit, physically and emotionally exhausted. The news of the affair could break him, but keeping quiet felt like betrayal. The following Friday, when they met at the bar, Thomas noticed that Chase looked even worse than usual. "Are you okay?" Thomas asked, even though the answer was obvious. "Fine," Chase replied automatically, staring into his glass. "You're lying. What's going on?" "Celia, I think something's wrong. She's pulling away." Thomas took a sip, searching for the right words. "Have you talked to her?" "About what? That she's hardly ever home? That we've forgotten when we were last intimate? Or that she might be having an affair with the neighbor?" Chase said the last sentence quietly, almost in a whisper, as if afraid to hear it from himself. Thomas didn't tell him what he had seen. Instead, he said, "If you suspect something, you need to talk to her. Ask her directly. And then what? What if I'm right? Then you'll decide what to do next, together or separately." "I can't lose her." Chase clenched his glass so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "But you're already losing her. Every day you stay silent." After meeting with Thomas, Chase sat in his car in front of the house for a long time, gathering his thoughts. He wanted to find out the truth, but he was afraid to hear it. Financial problems seemed insignificant compared to the possibility of losing Celia. When he entered the house, Celia was gone. So were her bags. There was a note on the refrigerator. "Mom is having health problems. I'm going to see her for the weekend. I'll be back on Monday." Celia's mother lived in Tampa, 3 hours away. But why didn't she call? Why didn't she wait for him to discuss it? Chase dialed her number, but her phone was off. He sent a text. "Everything okay? Call me when you can." There was no reply. He hardly slept that night, tossing and turning in the empty bed. Next to Celia's pillow, he found a long strand of light hair. It wasn't hers. Celia had dark hair. Perhaps it belonged to a client from the spa. Or... The next morning, he went to James's house, ostensibly to ask about a plumbing problem in the complex. No one answered the door. James's car was not in the parking lot. Coincidence? Amy, a neighbor, saw him at James's door and came over to say hello. "If you're looking for him, you're wasting your time. He's away for the weekend. Something work-related in Tampa, I think." Tampa, the city where Celia was supposedly located. Chase's heart skipped a beat. Thomas noticed the change in his friend's behavior even before Chase told him about his suspicions. Previously, despite his fatigue and financial problems, Chase had maintained a certain optimism. Now there was something new in his eyes, a mixture of fear, anger, and determination. "I need to know for sure," Chase said when they met again, this time at Thomas's apartment. "I can't live in ignorance." "What are you going to do?" Thomas asked, concerned by his friend's tone. "Find out the truth, at any cost. Just don't do anything stupid," Thomas warned. "Whatever is going on between you, violence won't solve anything." "I'm not talking about violence," Chase replied, his voice cold and determined. "I just want to know who I'm living with." On his way home, Chase thought about his plan of action. He could no longer ignore the signs. He just needed to find irrefutable proof. Then he would know what to do. On Monday evening, when Celia returned from Tampa, Chase was waiting for her at home. He had taken the day off, a rare occurrence in recent months. She looked surprised to see him on the sofa in the living room. "I didn't expect to find you here," she said, setting her bag on the floor. "I thought you were at work." "I decided to meet you. How's Mom?" "Better. It was just a migraine, but a bad one. You know how she gets." Chase knew that Celia's mother did indeed suffer from migraines. But he also knew that Celia had never rushed to her side so suddenly before, without warning him in advance. "Why was your phone off?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "The battery died, and I forgot my charger," Celia replied, walking into the kitchen. "Want some coffee?" He noticed that she was avoiding looking him in the eye. Before, even after a short separation, they would hug and kiss. Now, there was an invisible wall between them. While Celia was in the kitchen, Chase quickly checked her bag. He had never rummaged through his wife's things before, but now he felt he needed to know the truth. In the side pocket, he found a check from the Ocean View restaurant in Tampa. Dinner for two. The date was Saturday. The amount was almost $200, money they didn't have for their own needs. He took a photo of the check with his phone and put it back. They spent the whole evening like strangers living under the same roof, polite phrases, minimal communication. Chase didn't confront Celia with the check he found. First, he wanted to gather more evidence. The next day, Chase returned to his Uber driver schedule, but installed a small camera in his car, purchased for passenger safety. He pointed it not at the back seat, but so that it could see the entrance to their house. The car was often parked in the complex's parking lot when he was resting between shifts. 2 days later, the camera captured James entering their apartment. Celia let him in, looking around. They stayed inside for almost 2 hours. The recording showed them leaving, laughing, and talking. Before leaving, James quickly kissed Celia. That was all Chase needed. Proof of infidelity happening right in their home while he was at work, earning money to pay the mortgage and loans. In the evening, when Celia returned from work, Chase was sitting at the kitchen table. In front of him was an open laptop with a frame from the video, James kissing Celia at the front door. "What is this?" she asked, frozen in the doorway. "I think you know," Chase replied, his voice sounding unusually calm. "How long has this been going on?" Celia didn't deny it. She sank into a chair across from Chase, her shoulders slumping as if a weight had been lifted from them. 2 months, she finally said, "since that day at the pool." "In our house? Seriously, Celia? Where else? At a motel? Would that be better?" "It would be better not to cheat on your husband." Chase's calmness vanished. He slammed his fist on the table, causing the laptop to jump. "Do you even understand what I do every day? I work 16 hours a day so we can live here, pay the bills. And you bring your lover into our home? Do you even understand what it's been like for me all these years? Living with a man who is physically here but emotionally somewhere far away? You're not my husband anymore, Chase. You're a robot who makes money that's still not enough." They yelled at each other, spilling out their pent-up bitterness. The neighbors must have heard every word through the thin walls. "Do you think he's with you because he loves you?" Chase asked, when the first wave of anger had passed. "A real estate agent from Brickell Avenue and a spa administrator? Seriously? Don't you dare belittle me. James sees me as a person, not a source of income or a housekeeper." "Sure, and he takes you to $200 restaurants in Tampa. I wonder whose money that is. Is he married, Celia? Do you even know that about your lover?" That hit home. Celia was momentarily taken aback. "No, he's not married, and I know enough about him." "Really? I've learned more about him in 2 days than you have in 2 months. His real name isn't Hawthorne, it's Carlson, and he's not a luxury real estate agent. He sells cheap timeshares to retirees, and he was convicted of fraud 3 years ago." It was a bluff. Chase hadn't checked James's background, but Celia's reaction made it clear that his words had hit their mark. A flicker of doubt crossed her eyes. "You're lying. You're trying to discredit him because you're jealous. Check for yourself. Why do you think a man with a BMW lives in this complex? Everyone here is barely making ends meet, except for Mr. Elite Real Estate." Celia stood up, clenching her fists. "I'm not going to listen to this. We both know our marriage has been dead for a long time. I'm filing for divorce." "Fine. Run to your crook. Just don't cry when he dumps you for the next naive woman." Celia went into the bedroom and locked the door. Chase heard her talking on the phone, probably to James. Later, he heard the sound of drawers being pulled out. She was packing her things. The next morning, when he went into the kitchen, Celia was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. Her eyes were red from crying or a sleepless night. "I'm moving in with Anna," she said, referring to her colleague from the spa. "Just for a while, until I decide what to do next." Chase nodded as he poured himself some coffee. "What about James? Didn't he invite you to live with him?" "That's none of your business," Celia snapped, but Chase noticed her hands trembling. Perhaps his words about James had made her think, or more likely, James just wasn't ready for a serious relationship. Many men want romance, but not commitment. "Are you really filing for divorce?" Chase asked. "Yes, I've already talked to a lawyer." "What lawyer? We can barely afford groceries." "That's my business. I'll find a way to pay for it." The week after that conversation was the worst of Chase's life. Celia packed her things and moved in with a friend. Their apartment became empty and quiet. Chase stopped working. He couldn't concentrate on the road. He spent his days looking through photos, rereading old messages, trying to figure out when it all went wrong. Thomas visited him every day, bringing food and trying to get him out of the house. "You can't live like this, buddy," he said, watching Chase finish his second bottle of whiskey that evening. "She's gone. It hurts, but life goes on." "I've lost everything," Chase replied. "My job, my self-respect, and now my wife." "No, you lost a woman who didn't appreciate you. It's not the end of the world. She was my world. Then your world was too small. There are other women, and other jobs besides this damn Uber." But Chase wasn't listening. All he could think about was Celia and James. He imagined them together, in restaurants, in hotels, maybe planning a future. His future. Celia came to pick up the rest of her things on Friday, thinking Chase would be at work. But he was home. The conversation was tense. "I got your messages," she said. 32 in 3 days. This has to stop, Chase. "I just wanted to talk. We can fix this." "No, we can't. It's too late." "Because of him? Does he mean that much to you?" Celia sighed. "It's not about James. It's about us. We haven't been a couple for a long time, Chase. I'll change. I'll find another job. I'll spend more time at home. I've filed for divorce. It's over." After she left, Chase sat in a daze. Then he took out his phone and opened the location tracking app. He and Celia used to use it for safety reasons, to know where their partner was. Celia had obviously forgotten to turn off the feature. The dot on the map showed that she wasn't at her friend's house. She was in the Brickell neighborhood, where James lived. At that moment, Chase's phone buzzed with an incoming message. The number was unfamiliar, but the text immediately caught his attention. "Hi, this is Anna, Celia's friend. She doesn't know I'm writing to you. Listen, this James guy isn't who he says he is. Celia deserves to know the truth, but she won't listen to me. Maybe you'll listen." Chase reread the message several times. Were his suspicions about James confirmed? Or was this a mistake? He replied, "What do you mean? What's wrong with him?" The answer came a minute later. He has problems with the law. Lots of problems. And he's borrowing money from Celia. Large sums. She took out a loan to help him with some investment project. I'm afraid it's a scam. Chase clenched his phone so hard that his fingers turned white. James hadn't just stolen his wife. He was also taking advantage of her financially. Celia, always sensible with money, had given a loan to someone she barely knew. At that moment, another message arrived, this time from Celia. "I'll come by tomorrow to get the car documents. James said he could help sell it for more than a dealer would pay. Leave the keys in the glove compartment and park the car in our garage. I'll stop by with James around 7 p.m. The last pieces of the puzzle fell into place. James didn't just want Celia, he wanted everything. Their house, through a mortgage in Celia's name, their car, their money. Chase opened the cabinet and took out a bottle of whiskey, but didn't drink it. He needed a clear head. He began to make a plan. First, find out James's true identity. Second, find evidence of his fraud. Third, show everything to Celia before it's too late. He called Thomas. "I need your help. Come over immediately." Thomas arrived 20 minutes later, concerned by his friend's tone. "What's going on?" Chase showed him the messages from Anna and Celia. "James is a fraud. He's using Celia, and tomorrow they'll be here, in our garage, in my car." "What are you going to do?" Thomas asked, his voice filled with alarm. "Stop him. Show Celia who he really is before she loses everything." "I'll go with you." "No," Chase said firmly. "I have to do this myself." After Thomas left, Chase sat down at his computer. He began searching for information about James, using every available database and social network. By morning, he had a complete profile of the man who had stolen his wife, and that profile confirmed his worst fears. James was not who he claimed to be. Not at all. Saturday was unusually cool for Miami. Low gray clouds promised rain by evening. Chase spent the day preparing. He thoroughly washed his Honda Accord, the car that had been his office and only significant asset for the past 2 years. On the dashboard, he placed a folder with documents he had collected overnight. Excerpts from court cases against James Hawthorne, or more accurately, James Raymond Caldwell, as he was listed in police reports. Over the past 10 years, Caldwell had been arrested 3 times for fraud in California, Arizona, and Florida. He used different names and stories, but the scheme was always the same. Strike up a romantic relationship with a single or unhappily married woman, gain her trust, take money for investment projects, and disappear. Twice he was released due to insufficient evidence, and once he received a suspended sentence. By 6 in the evening, Chase had parked his car in the communal garage of the residential complex. Their parking space was in the far corner, next to the utility room. On Sundays, the garage was usually empty. Most of the residents were either relaxing at home or out for the day. As Celia had requested, he left the keys in the glove compartment. But he didn't leave. He settled in the utility room behind a half-open door, from where he had a good view of his car. He had his phone with him, containing the evidence he had gathered against James, and a bottle of water. He waited. At 7:08 p.m., the garage doors opened and Celia and James entered. She looked tired but determined. James, as always, was impeccably dressed. Expensive jeans, a white shirt, a leather jacket. They headed for Chase's car, talking quietly. "Are you sure he won't show up?" Chase heard James's voice. "Absolutely. He always works on Saturday nights. It's peak time for Uber." "And you've signed the power of attorney for the sale?" "Yes, with my lawyer. As soon as the car is sold, we can make the down payment on the apartment in Brickell." Chase clenched his fists. Everything was exactly as he had suspected. James was going to sell his car, pocket the money, and then disappear, just as he had done many times before with other women. The couple walked to the car. James opened the driver's door, and Celia got into the passenger seat. They closed the doors, and James started the engine, apparently to check that everything was working. Chase came out of hiding. His plan was simple: show Celia the documents, expose James, and go to the police together. To save her from the fraudster, even if their marriage could not be saved. But when he approached the car and saw James leaning toward Celia to kiss her through the window, something clicked in his head. All the months of humiliation, financial problems, and betrayal came crashing down on him at once. Instead of knocking on the window, Chase quickly walked to the garage door and pressed the emergency close button. The massive metal doors began to descend with a characteristic hum. James and Celia, busy talking in the car with the engine running, didn't notice the sound. It was barely audible over the air conditioner. Chase returned to his car. Now he acted mechanically, without thinking. It was as if he were watching himself from the outside. He took a lighter out of his pocket and walked over to the trunk. The tank was full. He had filled up the car that morning. Chase opened the gas cap and pulled out the fuel hose. Gasoline began to slowly leak onto the concrete floor of the garage. At that moment, Celia noticed him through the rear window. Her eyes widened in surprise. She nudged James and said something. He turned around. Chase saw the expression on his face change from confusion to alarm. James tried to open the door, but Chase managed to press the button on the alarm key fob. The central locking activated, blocking the doors. One of the few advantages of new car models is the ability to lock the doors remotely. Celia was banging on the window, shouting something. James tried to break the glass with his elbow, but the extra strong glass Chase had installed for his Uber work, another irony, would not yield. Gasoline spread across the garage floor, approaching the wheels. Chase clicked his lighter. At the last moment, he met Celia's gaze. Her eyes showed not so much fear as bewilderment. She couldn't understand what was happening. He threw the lit lighter onto the puddle of gasoline. The flames flared instantly, spread across the floor, and reached the car. In a second, the car was engulfed in flames. Chase turned and quickly walked to the side door of the garage. Celia and James's screams were drowned out by the roar of the flames. He didn't look back. Firefighters arrived 12 minutes after the automatic fire alarm in the garage went off. By that time, the fire had engulfed 3 parked cars and some of the technical equipment. Black smoke poured out of the vents and cracks around the closed gate. It took almost an hour to extinguish the flames and cool the room enough for rescuers to enter. When they finally got inside, the scene was horrific. Charred car wrecks, melted plastic, the smell of burning flesh. 2 bodies, one male and one female, were found in the mangled Honda Accord. Both had died from a combination of carbon monoxide poisoning and burns. Rescuers reported that the victims had probably lost consciousness from the smoke before the flames engulfed them, a small mercy in this tragedy. The police arrived at the scene at the same time as the medics. A young officer who was the first to enter the garage later said that he would never forget the smell and the sight. Detective Sarah Morrison arrived 40 minutes after the forensic team began their work. A fit, middle-aged woman with short hair and alert eyes, she immediately took control of the situation. "What do we have?" she asked the forensic investigator who was photographing the charred car. "2 bodies, presumably a man and a woman. The car is registered to Chase Rivera. Preliminary findings indicate arson. See the gasoline spills on the floor? Someone deliberately spilled fuel and set it on fire." Morrison walked around the car, carefully examining the crime scene. She noticed several details: the position of the bodies, both in the front seats, the closed and possibly locked doors, the key in the ignition. "Surveillance cameras?" she asked. "We're checking. There should be some in the garage, but they may have been damaged in the fire. Interview all the residents of the complex. Someone must have seen or heard something." After 2 hours of working at the crime scene, Detective Morrison had her first lead. One of the residents, an elderly man from the apartment directly above the garage, reported seeing a man quickly leaving the building at about the time the fire started. "It was that guy, the Uber driver," he said. "Tall, thin, always says hello when we meet at the elevator." "Do you know his name?" Morrison asked. "No, but his wife works at the spa on Bay Street. Celia, I think." Morrison quickly connected the dots. The car was registered to Chase Rivera. One of the victims was presumably his wife, Celia. But who was the second victim? And where was Chase himself? Back at the station, Morrison began gathering information about the Rivera family. Chase, 32, previously worked for a travel company and was now an Uber driver. Celia, 30, was an administrator at the Oasis Spa on Bay Street. They had been married for 6 years and had no children. Morrison sent officers to the spa to interview Celia's colleagues. One of the employees, Anna Parker, proved to be particularly informative. "Celia and Chase were going through a rough patch," she said in an interview. "They were having financial problems, and then this neighbor, James, came along. He literally swept her off her feet." "James? Do you have his last name?" "Hawthorne. James Hawthorne. A real estate agent, or so he said. Celia moved in with me a week ago and said she was divorcing Chase. But yesterday she said she was going to James's place. They were planning to look at Chase's car together. Something to do with the sale. Morrison ordered a background check on James Hawthorne. The response came back faster than she expected, and it was unexpected. There was no James Hawthorne in the Palm Haven complex's resident database. The apartment where he supposedly lived was rented by someone named James Caldwell. Further investigation revealed that James Raymond Caldwell had a criminal record for fraud in several states. His method was always the same. He would meet a woman in a vulnerable position, engage in a romantic relationship, extract money from her, and then disappear. His last arrest was 3 years ago in Florida, and he received a suspended sentence. It looks like our second victim was a professional con man, Morrison told her colleague. Now we need to find her husband. The search for Chase Rivera began immediately. His photo was distributed to all Miami patrol officers. Airports, bus stations, and rental car companies were checked. Credit cards and bank accounts were put on alert. The first serious lead came from a call from the manager of a motel on the outskirts of town. He recognized Chase from a photo on the evening news. The man had checked in the night before, paid in cash, and had not checked out by the appointed time. Morrison personally led the arrest team, but when they broke into the motel room, it was empty. On the bed lay an envelope marked "To the detective in charge of the case." Inside was a flash drive and a short note. The truth about James Caldwell. The flash drive contained dozens of documents, screenshots of court cases, police reports, interviews with Caldwell's previous victims, bank statements. It seemed that Chase had conducted a thorough investigation into his wife's lover, and he knew who he was before the fire happened. "That gives us a motive," Morrison said to her partner. "Rivera found out his wife was involved with a con man. Maybe he tried to warn her, and when that didn't work, he decided to take revenge on both of them. Or protect his wife in the only way he knew how," her partner suggested, "by eliminating the threat. Either way, it's murder. Double murder." The medical examiner confirmed the identities of the deceased, Celia Rivera and James Caldwell. The cause of death for both was carbon monoxide poisoning and thermal burns. Traces of recent sexual activity were found on Celia's body, indicating an intimate relationship with Caldwell shortly before her death. Forensic investigators found Chase's fingerprints on the gas tank cap and the emergency gate release button at the crime scene. Witness testimony confirmed that he left the building around the time the fire started. There was little doubt. Chase Rivera was the main and only suspect in the double murder. Thomas Garcia, Chase's best friend, learned of the tragedy from the news. He immediately tried to contact his friend. Dozens of calls, messages, voice recordings, all to no avail. The next day, Thomas went to the police station himself. "I need to talk to the detective in charge of the Palm Haven fire case," he told the officer at the front desk. Detective Morrison received him in her office. Thomas looked exhausted, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "I'm a friend of Chase Rivera," he began. "We saw each other the day before the incident." "Did he tell you about his plans?" Morrison asked. "No. I mean, he was upset about the divorce and about Celia getting involved with this James guy. Chase had found some evidence that he was a con man. He wanted to show it to Celia, to save her from making a mistake." "Did he mention a meeting in the garage about the car?" "Celia wrote that she and James were coming to look at the car to sell it. Chase wanted to be there to expose the guy." "But he didn't mention arson? Violence?" Thomas shook his head. "No, Chase wasn't that kind of person. He loved Celia, no matter what. He wanted to protect her, not hurt her." "Then why is he hiding?" "I don't know. I'm trying to contact him, but without success. If he gets in touch, I'll let you know right away." After Thomas left, Morrison thought about it. Her friend's story didn't match the evidence. All the evidence pointed to arson. Locked doors, spilled gasoline, a planned murder. But where was Chase Rivera? And why did he leave all the evidence against Caldwell if he was planning to escape? The phone on her desk rang. It was a patrol officer checking motels in the suburbs. "Detective Morrison? We may have found your suspect." "He's dead, Detective," the patrol officer reported when Morrison arrived at the Sunset Motel on the outskirts of Miami. The manager became concerned when the guest didn't check out by noon. He used a spare key and found him. Chase Rivera was lying on the bed in a cheap room. Next to him was an empty bottle of sleeping pills and a bottle of whiskey. On the bedside table was a letter in a sealed envelope addressed to Detective Morrison. "Suicide?" Morrison asked, examining the body. "It looks that way. No signs of a struggle. The door was locked from the inside." Morrison put on gloves and carefully opened the envelope. Inside were several sheets of paper covered in neat handwriting. "I didn't plan to kill them," the letter began. "I just wanted to show Celia the truth about James. The documents on the flash drive are everything I found on him. He was a con man, a swindler. He used women, took their money, and disappeared. It was going to be the same with Celia. She took out a loan for his investment project. She mortgaged our apartment. But when I saw them together in my car, something broke inside me. I don't remember pouring the gasoline or setting it on fire. I only remember her eyes behind the glass. Not angry, not scared, just surprised. As if she didn't believe I was capable of such a thing until the very end. I didn't believe it myself. I'm sorry." Morrison folded the letter. The confession was complete, but she still had a lot to figure out. The autopsy confirmed that Chase died of an overdose of sleeping pills combined with alcohol. Toxicology tests showed that he took the pills about 12 hours after the fire, enough time to fully realize what he had done. In the days that followed, Morrison immersed herself in the investigation. She studied the documents on Chase's flash drive and discovered that James Caldwell was indeed a serial con artist. Over the course of 10 years, he had defrauded at least 7 women in different states, using romantic relationships for financial gain. Morrison found and interviewed one of his former victims, Rebecca Wilson from Tampa. "He was charming, attentive," Rebecca said. "He was a good listener and made me feel special. When he asked for money to invest, I didn't even hesitate. I gave him all my savings, $45,000. He disappeared the next day." "Did you file a police report?" "Of course, but he used a different name, cash, and prepaid phones. They never found him. Later, I found out I wasn't the only one." Celia's bank statements showed that she had taken out a $30,000 loan a week before her death. The money was transferred to an account registered to Caldwell's company, Brickell Investments. The company existed only on paper. At the same time, Morrison learned more about Chase. His former colleagues at the travel company described him as a reliable, hard-working person. After being fired, he desperately searched for work, but eventually agreed to drive for Uber to pay his bills. "He never complained," said the company manager. "Even when he was fired, he understood that it was business, nothing personal. He just shook my hand and left with his head held high." Thomas Garcia, still reeling from his friend's death, showed Morrison messages from Chase over the past few months. They traced an evolution from financial anxiety to suspicions of his wife's infidelity, then panic over her relationship with a con man, and finally, a determination to save her from her mistake. "He loved her," Thomas insisted. "Everything he did was for her. Even when he worked around the clock, it was so she could live with dignity." "But he killed her," Morrison reminded him. "That wasn't him, not the Chase I knew. Something broke in that moment." Morrison tended to agree. The crime had not been carefully planned. Rather, it was a moment of temporary insanity by a man who saw his whole life falling apart. At the spa where Celia worked, her colleagues said that she had been unusually happy in recent weeks. James had promised her a new life, an apartment in Brickell, a career in real estate, travel. Everything she had dreamed of, but couldn't have with Chase. "She wasn't a bad person," said Anna, her friend. "She was just tired of constantly fighting. James offered an easy way out. Who wouldn't be tempted?" Since the main suspect was dead, there was no formal trial. Instead, 3 weeks after the tragedy, a hearing was held to close the case. The judge, prosecutor, and attorney appointed to represent the deceased, Chase, reviewed all the evidence. The final conclusion: Chase Rivera committed double murder in a state of affect caused by emotional stress and betrayal. Then, realizing what he had done, he took his own life. The case was closed. However, the consequences of the tragedy continued to unfold. The story attracted the attention of the local media, especially after Caldwell's criminal past came to light. The headlines read, "Repeat fraudster killed by deceived husband. Tragedy in Miami when the justice system fails to protect." Several of Caldwell's former victims contacted the police after recognizing him from photos in the news. Federal authorities launched an investigation into his financial fraud, which spanned 5 states. Celia's parents came from Tampa to arrange their daughter's funeral. A quiet ceremony was held at the Miami City Cemetery. Detective Morrison was among the few people in attendance. She watched the grieving parents, trying to comprehend the depth of the tragedy she had failed to prevent. Chase was buried in the same cemetery, but on a different day and without a public ceremony. Only Thomas and a few former colleagues attended. Chase had no parents. They had died in a car accident when he was 20. A month after the case was closed, Morrison received a package from Rebecca Wilson's lawyer. Inside was a check for $30,000 and a short note. To pay off Celia Rivera's loan, let at least something be righted. Caldwell's former victims banded together to pay off Celia's debt to the bank. Morrison handed the check over to the bank, and the Riveras' mortgage was paid off. The lawyer took care of selling the house, and the proceeds, according to Celia's will, written before she met James, were to go to her parents. Thomas Garcia received a small box with Chase's personal belongings found at the motel. Among them was an old photograph of Chase and Celia on their wedding day, happy, looking at each other with love. On the back was written, "Forever." The Palm Haven residential complex installed a new security system in the garage after the tragedy. The apartment where the Riveras lived remained unsold for a long time. The story scared off potential buyers. In the end, it was bought by a young couple from New York who knew nothing about what had happened. Detective Morrison officially closed the case, but she often returned to it in her mind. The tragedy was the result not of a single decision, but of a chain of events: financial problems, emotional alienation, infidelity, fraud, and finally, a moment of uncontrollable rage.